to all of a sudden be able to grow broccoli in Virginia or North Carolina or Louisiana or Kentucky or Illinois is all of a sudden starts to make sense, because you can say, you can take that and put that back to your farm. And on top of that, you're going to get a premium. They're going to pay more for you than they were paying for getting this box that's 3 days old and that has no identity with a local farmer, and they're going to want it from you now because of supply chain, and the supply chain worries. And so buyers are going to start looking for, who can I support?
Welcome back for part 2 of a conversation between NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist Mike Lewis and Michael O'Gorman, an organic farming pioneer and founder of the Farmer Veteran Coalition. In this episode of Voices from the Field, Mike and Michael talk about mitigating risk, in tomato crops in particular, and agriculture operations in general. Michael also describes why he thinks the current energy situation may help new, locally oriented farmers get into the business. And if you missed the first part of the discussion, you can find a link in the show notes for this podcast. Let's listen.
I have another question for you. One of the things that we do on our farm, and this relates directly to me, so I'm hoping that other people find it helpful as well as I glean advice from you. But we're always testing out new crops and trying to find, new potential markets and new potential customers. We do that on a pretty small scale. And then sort of, like you said, we're tracking the records to see how much it's actually costing us to produce it. So if we did scale up. And recently, we just got a new tomato contract. And thanks to your advice from years ago, it's not one tomato, it's 6 tomatoes in that product line. And we've got the planting all down. But my question is, how do I adjust for loss, right? I mean, I can look at my thing and say, okay, I need a 100-foot row every 25 days. But how do you go about factoring in loss? I don't know where you are, what you have for predators, but I've got tomato predators, but I've got a few around here, and there's inevitably some loss. So how do you go about factoring in how much extra to plant to mitigate that potential loss so that you can still maintain the?
Earlier I talked about this big sucking sound that happened after World War II, where so much of local vegetable production moved to California. And the reason, because they didn't have rain on the plant while it was growing. There's nothing more critical than tomatoes. The demand for a local tomato, the demand for a good flavorful tomato, and one that's picked, fully ripe or close to ripe and not necessarily bred for shipping, is so high, that it's a fantastic time to grow those crops. And tomatoes, they love, warm nights. The weather in Kentucky is fantastic. It's going to grow a tomato fast, but you're also going to have that problems with early blight as you get the warmth and the humidity. And I think that historically, you may not have the same length of harvest that you would if you didn't have that pressure. So I think, like you said, 25 days or something is probably a pretty good time to repeat your plantings where you are, in case, because it's not really a question of whether you're going to get early blight in Kentucky. It's a question of how soon and how fast. I mean, that was my experience, but you can hold it off. You can mitigate and hold it off and do what you can to get a good crop out of there. On the market side, the important thing, so you do have to face the reality of potential loss. But your buyers are smart, and they know that, so the main thing, so on the other hand, is work with your buyers. If you are facing loss, don't wait till the day they're waiting for a shipment to tell them, let them know as fast as this first round is getting hurt, and we're going to come on with this next. The next planting's looking better, and they're going to hang in with you as long as you communicate with them. They want your tomatoes. They want Kentucky, strong flavor, squirting juice out on the plate tomatoes, So I think that's a fantastic thing. But, try to give them a little bit of airflow. Maybe you don't have to prune them or expect them to have a long life where you're like pruning the 1 or 2 liters or something, but you might want to do a little pruning low on the tomato to get some airflow and to help hold off that blight. And the other most important thing for blight probably is, be careful when you pick and handle your tomatoes and stake and tie them, and don't touch the tomatoes when they're wet from the morning dew or from the rain, and let them dry out, and hopefully you got water like drip irrigation and don't have to do any overhead water. So you can make that last. The other thing I always tell people, you want to extend that season. A lot of people focus on their high tunnels to get an early crop and jump in with tomatoes. But really, anything you do, and you can do some, mini tunnels and different things. You make your first transplant, your largest, take your 6-pack tomatoes and grow them out in a 4x4 and get a nice 8-week plant out. And that's, you get a good jump on your first tomatoes. But I would use a high tunnel for your later tomatoes because, going into the heat, you got heat there. You not only got humidity, but you got hot summers. And so if you're trying to stake a tomato and they're in a high tunnel, it's going to get hot. The higher the tomato is on the plant, it's going to get softer. It's going to not like that heat in there. But if you can get enough heat going into the fall, plant your tomatoes and, your last planting in late July or 1st of August, plant that in a high tunnel, mid-September, October, it's growing, you're harvesting tomatoes in a high tunnel. You may be able to keep those tomatoes going, to Thanksgiving and even beyond. And that's when money's made in a tomato crop is when you can have them when no one else does and make some good money at the end of the year. So there's a lot of ways to extend that season and to keep yourself in and take advantage of the demand for it. It's, tomatoes are they're the iconic crop of a vegetable farmer. My middle name's, I asked my brother one time about a password and I would thought, the tomatoes are both involved in our identity and our DNA at this point.
No, that's great. And we did actually, for reference, we managed to have tomatoes through Christmas in a high tunnel. And I wish I'd have done 5 times as many because I would have made some money.
Yeah, Rooster agrees on that. He said, man.
My wife captured him last night. He's grumpy. He's in a tiny cage now, so I didn't realize he was right behind my head. I apologize, everyone. Well, it sounds like to me that we're going to have to catch up and do this again just on tomatoes because I wasn't taking notes as fast as you were talking, but sounds like we might have to catch up again real soon and talk about tomatoes.
Don't have time to stay up to date on the freshest sustainable agriculture news, events, and funding opportunities? You can trust NCAT to keep you connected with our weekly harvest e-newsletter. Subscribe today at ncat.org and get your weekly harvest delivered each Wednesday.
But I think if I look at it, we're probably coming close to the end of our time, Michael, but I do want to give you a chance to add anything, say anything, tell us a story, whatever you'd like.
Awesome. Well, I would reiterate, in my lifetime, I've seen 2, if you were a surfer, you would call them, that there's every few years or a couple of times in your lifetime, there's perfect waves are coming, and this is a perfect wave for a new farmer. And, I rode the wave of the demand for organic farming. A big part of my career was sheer luck for being in the right place at the right time that, I had accumulated enough knowledge in farming in those first 20 years when the demand for organics exploded. There was nobody really that was both organic and knew how to scale it. And I got to ride that wave. There's a whole other wave now, and that's the other way. And it's not for doing the type of stuff I did. It's for producing locally and selling in local markets. The cost of shipping a truckload of produce, they switched to 56-foot trailers, has 28 pallets. But if you take 28 pallets and ship it across the country, it's a little over, and say broccoli, 28 times 42, a little over 1,100 boxes. Still, the cost per box just to ship it across the country, and the box itself, the cost of shipping and the box itself is going to exceed the price the farmer got for the broccoli in California. So to compete, to all of a sudden be able to grow broccoli in Virginia or North Carolina or Louisiana or Kentucky or Illinois is all of a sudden starts to make sense, because you can say, you can take that and put that back to your farm. And on top of that, you're going to get a premium. They're going to pay more for you than they were paying for getting this box that's 3 days old and that has no identity with a local farmer, and they're going to want it from you now because the supply chain worries. And so buyers are going to start looking for, who can I support? Who can I work with locally? And I know this is going on in the meat and for small poultry growers and beef producers and pork and eggs and vegetables. It is, the wind is at the back of anybody going into production right now. And that's a wonderful thing, because it's kind of, if you can grow it, your likelihood of being able to sell it and manage it and get yourself a foothold and solidify a business is really, really good. So I think that understanding the historic and the rarity of the opportunity that exists right now is really, really important. And, anything I could do to help and support, people that are looking at that, I'm great to do it, because America needs new farmers, and this is a good chance for them to get on board.
Michael, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and an honor too. I actually got to be there and ride part of one of your waves with you in your career, so I feel fortunate for that. And as always, I thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you, Michael.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.